You're listening to 515, the Ultra Podcast, the show that invites you into the lives of people who make up the Ultra family. Here's your host for these conversations, Larry Ryan.
Thanks, MJ. Welcome, everyone, to Season 4 of 515. Today's conversation is with a man hoping to be the first blind athlete to finish a 515 distance event when he races in a few weeks at Ultraman Florida, February 10th through the 12th. Season 4, everybody. Wow. Thank you for coming along for the ride. I have a number of great guests lined up from around the world this season. Remember to subscribe so that you don't miss any of these amazing people tell their incredible stories. If you are new to my podcast, I publish every 3 weeks on Friday, and there is a large library of episodes available with full show notes at our website or wherever you download your podcast. Be sure to go back and check those out. This season, I have so many guests to share with you. I will actually be releasing an extra episode within the next 3 weeks, which will be the Ultraman Florida preview with race director Jen McVeigh and the man with the stats, Steve King. That episode will also have another athlete in profile for Florida, Amy Jo Jenkins. That special off-regular release episode will be on February the 6th, so that you know who to follow at the race starting on the 10th. All right, let's get into today's conversation. My athlete in profile today is a certified coach and the director of the New York Metro region for Achilles International, a global adaptive sports and advocacy organization serving people with disabilities, like himself. He has podiumed in the para or physically challenged division in a number of marathons and 70.3 races. Last year, he did his first full Ironman in Arizona, finishing second in his division in a time of 13:31.51 in order to qualify for Ultraman Florida. He has also finished second at the Tokyo Paralympic cycling trials for the USA in the 30K TT. He's from New York, but today joining me from Telluride, where he is out skiing. Welcome to the podcast, Francesco Magisano.
Hey, what's up, man? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you for joining me and taking time out of your skiing to do the interview. And also joining us today is his guide for the upcoming Ultraman Florida, an alumni of the race and an experienced crew member there. He is also a New Yorker, Brian Hammond.
Hey, Larry. Thanks for having us.
It's great to have both of you here to understand the teamwork that it's going to take to get this monumental task done, as it is for all the athletes to get to that finish line. Now, for listeners, most of my athletes in profile conversation, I usually spend the first part learning about the athletic history of the athlete and then do the transition round and learn more about the personal life. Today, we're going to do that in reverse because I think for you, Francesco, much of what your life has turned into, your personal life has also grown with your athletic career, such as your job. So if you're okay with that, we're going to do it in reverse today.
Cool.
Excellent. So, Francesco, as far as ultra athletes go, you are on the younger side. You're just 28 years old, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as I said, you live in New York City. So I'm wondering, do you live in one of those giant New York City apartments in Manhattan that we see on TV sitcoms? Or are you in some shared accommodation with 7 roommates? Or are you in a house in the outer boroughs? Like, what's your life like in New York City?
So definitely a combo of the first two. So I share an apartment with 2 other blind athletes, actually, which is a hilarious sitcom in and of itself. And so the 3 of us are in an apartment in Manhattan, in New York City. And yeah, like very, very stereotypical what you'd picture as a Manhattan apartment.
As a Manhattan apartment on TV, or as a Manhattan apartment as in it's that tiny skinny little thing that you can reach out and touch both walls at the same time?
Oh, when I wake up in the morning, I can knock on the wall behind me and basically wake one of my buddies up. And if I go to the bathroom and knock on that wall, I wake my other roommate up. So it's very close together.
Yeah. And are you like a swinging New York bachelor, or what's the status like in that form?
Not married yet. So that's an in progress situation that
Yeah.
we're gonna see how it develops. It's a great time. It's a great time to be in New York.
Yeah, yeah. And Brian, you're a little bit older. I believe you're 47. Is that correct?
Yeah, 47, so a little bit older than Francesco. But
Brian's 47. What?
I've been
And
hiding
you're
it all these
guiding me?
years. Yeah.
You're a little more settled into that whole family situation, Brian. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I've been here in New York right out of college, so 1999. Francesco might have been born. I'm not really positive or not. So I've been here for 24 years now, and I'm married. So I'm married to Sarah, and then we have two girls. We have a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old, Sophia and Avery.
Mhm.
Got a dog. So I mean, we got the typical, family story, except for the white picket fence. Like, we do not have a fence in our apartment. Apartment might be a little bit bigger than Francesco's, and we do keep our lights on, unlike Francesco.
Yeah, when you get sighted people coming over to our apartment, all the lights are off. It's black, pitch black, and yeah, it's kind of funny.
I would imagine, yeah. Now, Brian, you're the head coach and lead bike fitter at Trufit Solutions. Is that your own company?
Yeah, it's my own company. I've been bike fitting and coaching endurance athletes here in New York really since I got here. So probably the last 15 years or so. That's how I started about 15 years ago. Yeah.
And Francesco, are you one of his athletes?
Yeah, we met. I will talk about it, but several years ago, and been doing it ever since.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, Brian, how often when you're out at a race, do you look at an athlete on their bike and then just want to go over and just shake them and be like, you need to go get a bike fit somewhere, please?
Yeah, it happens a lot. It's like, I always remember it's kind of like a lifeguard going to a beach, right? You can never kind of fully relax when you're at like a bike race or something like that. And for me, what's tough is Central Park, right? Like, we do all of our training in Central Park. It's a 6-mile loop, and there's hundreds of cyclists in there a day. So whether I'm running or biking, I'm just like handing out business cards left and right, being like, you should call me. Just give me a call.
Yeah. So, Francesco, maybe we can get into some background on your blindness. I understand that you were born with sight, but then you lost it as a teenager. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so when I was 10 months old, I was diagnosed with eye cancer and went through much eye surgeries and all that, but still had decent vision. I couldn't drive, but I could read small print if I held it up really close to my eyes, all the way up until about 16 years old. And then from 16 to now, it's been basically zero black. So that's also, the progression, the transition to learning more about how to use a cane, how to read Braille, things like that.
Right. Yeah. And have you ever worked with a guide animal, or are you always a cane?
Always a cane. I thought about, I actually got run over by an 18-wheel truck 4 or 5 years ago. And that was actually the only time I ever thought of getting a guide dog, because obviously a guide dog would have seen it and all that. But I think I love moving around and just being free. And I kind of do things impulsively, and having a guide dog, it's a lot more to think about, right? Because you can't just turn on a dime and do whatever. So ultimately didn't go that route for now. So yeah.
Now, in New York City, is it difficult for you to get around on the sidewalks? Because, we know how busy the sidewalks are there. Or are people pretty generous about getting out of your way when you get the cane moving in front of you?
I'd say New York is one of the easiest places to navigate as a blind person. So everything's a grid. It's super easy to figure out and count building numbers and street numbers and navigate. And, if someone gives me an address, I can find it pretty easily. I'd say a city like Milan or Tokyo, for example, so I'm half Italian, half Japanese, so spent time there. Those older cities tend to be a lot harder because all the streets are windy. There's nothing really uniform. And that's a lot more of a memorization thing.
Right. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Now, as I said in the opening, you're the director of the New York Metro region for Achilles International. Now, I assume you got involved in that first as an athlete. Can you tell me what it is that you do there now, and what it is a little bit? What is the mission of it?
Yes, for sure. So Achilles International, it's a global organization. They have chapters around 80, 85 chapters all around the world. And it basically gets people with disabilities involved with endurance sports. And so for the majority of people, it's running or walking or rolling, right? So if you have like a spinal cord injury, a lower limb loss, you might ride a hand cycle if you're not able to run, like ambulatory. And so that's the core program. And we also have a multi-sport program called Tri Achilles. And that's how I kind of started my way. 2017, I found Achilles because this guy in a grocery store basically came up to me and was like, "Hey, you're blind. You should join this running group." And I was like, "Okay, cool. I'll Google it, make sure it's not like a cult or something. And as long as it looks kind of normal, I'll show up," which is what I did. And so 5 years later, and I lead the operations and the growth and all that stuff for New York City Achilles. So we have borough chapters in 4 of the 5 boroughs of New York, serving like kids, veterans, adults, everything with disabilities.
Oh, that's great. And are there lots of people that come out to be guides, or are you constantly recruiting? How do you find people that want to or can be an appropriate guide for this organization?
So the biggest recruiting tool that we have for volunteers is actually our neon yellow jerseys and hats and logos and all that stuff that people just see running in the park, and they just go home, Google it, like figure out what it is and show up. That is honestly like 85-90% of how we get volunteers. I lead a Saturday morning workout in Central Park every Saturday year round, rain or shine. And I'd say on average, we'll have, I don't know, like 30 to 50 people with disabilities, and then maybe 30 to 100 volunteer runners. So just depending on if it's like, 10 degrees or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah. And is there a training course that the volunteers do, or do they just show up and it's thrown into the fire and we'll teach you what to do?
Yeah, so I lead a new guide orientation and training. And so it goes over how to guide different athletes with all different disabilities, how to ask questions, like safe verbal cueing, what to do in emergencies, all that stuff we kind of go over. And that's the basic level of guide training. And then we also have guide trainings for a little more advanced. So like for race guiding, it's a little different than training, like running in the park guiding. And then also cycling guiding, so like tandem piloting, open water swim guiding, all those other aspects of guiding we also cover and do training on.
Right. And we were just saying at the beginning that you're in Telluride now doing some skiing. So is that another level of guiding? Do you have someone working with you to keep you safe on the slope?
So actually, I partner with this organization called Telluride Adaptive Sports Program, TASP, and they actually do adaptive sports here in Telluride. And so I hook up with them for skiing. So I ski with this guy, Thomas Chapman, awesome dude. We basically communicate with radio headsets, and he skis behind me and, kind of tells me like right turn, left turn, like kind of keeps me centered on the course and avoiding smashing into people and things.
Oh, yeah. And then are you labeled as a blind skier as well, so other people will know to keep out of your pathway?
Yeah. We all wear like high vis things, and there's the main guide. So Thomas is the one communicating with me, skiing right behind me, or like a couple turns behind me. And then we have a second guide who's kind of the bodyguard. They are skiing a little bit distant, but they go between us and anyone who's approaching, just to like, heads up, push them away kind of thing.
That's great. You have your own bodyguard on the hill. I'd like to have that.
Yeah, it was so fun. It's like VIP.
Yeah. So is this how you two met? Did you meet at a New York training session, or how did you guys meet, Brian?
Through Achilles.
Okay.
So I started working with Achilles in a coaching manner with their Tri Achilles team a few years before Francesco got there. Actually, I randomly met somebody at a stop sign on my bike, and they were like, "Hey, did you ever hear about Achilles?" I mean, it is kind of a cult, I can say. Randomly just stalking people. But they were, doing the triathlon program. So I got involved helping run some camps and just some programming for the triathlon aspect of it. And then Francesco came along, and I think I participated as Francesco's first guide in triathlon, I think, right?
Yeah.
Well, it turned into a duathlon. Swim did get canceled. And funny enough, I think I had to wear a women's Achilles tri-top that day. And then during Ironman Arizona, Francesco luckily brought me a top, and he brought me a women's running top, which was nice. You don't have a blind guy pick your clothes. That's basically
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just keeping things interesting,
And nothing's going to match. So, Francesco, when the guides meet and the athletes meet, is this a little bit like dating? Do you go out a few times with someone and decide if you're a good fit as a guide to the athlete? Like, how does that work?
So super funny. Yeah. So the people with whom I train the most frequently, I'd say I've known them for a while. Like we're friends first, right? Like we go out, have drinks, whatever, and then we also train. Um, it's interesting because when you talk about guide selection, it's the higher level of competition you get, like the less choice you have necessarily. So like we do this whole kind of athlete guide meant like counseling, like just moment at a lot of our camps, and even we're starting to do it now, just like virtually.
Mhm.
And it's just talking about that relationship, right? Because it is a relationship, but
Right.
there is a level of it's like half personal, half professional. And so it's just very interesting seeing that dynamic where like I've raced my first ever triathlon nationals that I did, I raced with a guy that I met the day before the race, and we did like loops in the parking lot on the tandem, and like that was the way we got to know each other. And like
Yeah.
completely different personalities, but we were connected through a team. He's like, was a pro, and we just like, not the same setup that you would do if you're trying to look for like a weekly training partner, let's say, like in
Right.
the neighborhood. So yeah.
Yeah. And so like what was happening during COVID when you're not going out with a partner probably, right? Like were you stuck on a treadmill
Yeah.
at that point? What were all these blind athletes doing that rely on a guide?
So very good question. We pivoted really quickly to doing virtual workouts because obviously like we couldn't have athletes and guides meet up in person. And so I think like a week or two in back in March, I started streaming like a ton of virtual workouts to all of our community. And then a few months in, we started like having people kind of create their own athlete guide pods where like I'd run with the same guide a couple times a week, and we like understand who was who was going out with who and all that stuff.
Right.
And then we resumed workouts actually in September of 2020.
Mm.
With protocols and all that stuff, obviously, but got things going pretty quickly as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you were doing these workouts online, like I said in the introduction, you're also a certified coach, right? And you do a lot of coaching with the Achilles then, and Brian's your coach.
Yeah.
But together, it's all part of that coaching continuum.
Yeah, especially because I mean, with Achilles, the vast majority of athletes or people, right, with disabilities who join, they have little to no athletic background, and
Mhm.
part of it's because of the availability. Like before I joined Achilles, I never did endurance sports because I never knew that there was even that opportunity or that I could, right? And
Mhm.
sorry, like unfortunately, many other people with disabilities are kind of like that. So, like, I was getting these athletes coming up to me asking like super basic questions, like, "Oh, how do you progress in like intervals over a couple of weeks?" Like just basic questions like that.
Right.
And I wanted educated answers, not just bro science, right? So like I started researching stuff and was like, why don't I just get a cert? So that's what I did.
Excellent. So, Francesco, how do you spend your time when you are not training then? Obviously, skiing is one of the things that you do. Are there other sports that you take part in? Do you have other hobbies that you do? Do you got a regular bowling night or something?
Yeah. So, well, sport wise, I've been getting into hiking a lot. And so like exploring, it's surprising how much cool hiking there is just within like New York City area, like within an hour and 90-minute drive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been doing some of that. Bar trivia is super fun because
Oh,
then you get to like gather with your friends and just explore your knowledge of random trivia.
I do that every
Um,
Tuesday night as well with my friends.
you do bar trivia? That's so fun, man, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just and honestly, like between training and working, like it's fun. It's all it is.
Well, great, great. And I saw on your Instagram that you rang the bell at the NASDAQ recently. I
I
know it
did,
was
yeah.
to do with the Achilles, but how were you chosen to do that out of Achilles?
Yeah, well, so we had a small group, the CEO of Achilles, plus like several of our directors and VPs and stuff were there. And it's just fun. I mean, it gives exposure, right, to Achilles or for Achilles to a group of people that may not know about Achilles. So
Right.
it's another cool opportunity.
Yeah. Brian, how about you? Do you remember, like you said, you've been doing these ultra sports now for 20 some odd years. Do you remember what it was like before ultra? What was your life like then?
No, it's too long ago. Yeah,
Were
no,
there
I've
other sports
always,
that you were involved in growing up?
growing up, typical team sports, football, wrestling, track and field. And then I was always into biking. So I always raced BMX bikes when I was a kid, and that led me to mountain biking kind of down this whole path.
Mm.
As far as hobbies are concerned, man, I'm just a little ticked that Francesco hasn't invited me to Tuesday night bar trivia. I mean, I think I'm a pretty smart guy, and I like beer, so I'm not sure what the heck happened
You're
there.
on, Brian, on and off the race course.
Jeez, man. Yeah, it's kind of hard to remember. I mean, it's always been a part of it. My wife is also a marathon runner and Ironman athlete, so it's kind of how we've even spent our time during our, courtship. So, yeah, I don't think it existed time before Ultramans.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into our transition round, Francesco. We'll do some rapid fire questions. You give me some rapid fire answers because we just do this for 2 minutes in transition, and then we'll talk more about your sporting life on the other side.
Cool.
Okay. What is your go-to workout music?
Rap or metal or country music?
So you don't play it for both of you then, it's just for you.
Oh, so we very rarely train together. We only basically race together. It's just hilarious.
Okay. Which athlete do you most admire?
I don't know. Next. There's too many.
Okay. What is a book that you most recommend to other people?
I love The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. It's historical fiction, and it's about revenge and love and hatred and all that stuff. It's awesome.
All right. How many bikes do you own?
3.
Do you have a favorite?
My 7 cycles titanium tandem. It's pretty rad.
What is the favorite event that you have done so far?
Oh, it's like asking how many stars are in the sky. There's so many good ones. I don't know, the most recent one. I don't know, Ironman Arizona. All of them.
What's on your bucket list for something that you want to do after you finish Ultraman?
Some race in Hawaii, some capacity. I don't know. I know there's like a few different options. There are a few different routes we could take, so that'd be fun.
And post-race, what's your favorite food? What do you indulge in after a race?
Ramen.
Nice. Looking at both of your race resumes, I know that you did the Ironman Arizona together recently. What other races have you done together, Brian?
We did his first small try out in Montauk. I think it was Mighty Man Montauk Sprints. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I mean, we did the USA Cycling Championships, both the road race and the TT, 2 years in 2019 and then 2021 because it was canceled in 2020. And that was the first time Francesco actually raced just a road bike or a TT bike as well, like first cycling event. And the longest time, that was the first time he rode over like 40 miles or something too, I think.
Oh. So yeah,
before then, I think the longest ride I think was like 25 miles or something, and then we're in Knoxville, Tennessee, like doing a shakeout ride, and we're like getting ready for this 45-mile road race, and Brian's like, "Wait a second, like what's the longest ride you've done? Like 25 miles? Like great, you're about to do a 45-mile road race, and the longest race you've done or longest ride you've done is 25 miles." So yeah, it was great. It was awesome. Brian did. What was your longest one? It was like couple hundred or something, right? So like between the two of us, we kind of evened out, right? I feel like that's how this works, right?
What is your longest ride, Brian?
Longest ride would actually be Ultraman 2016, 172. That's probably still my longest single ride event. Longest time ride would be 24-hour mountain bike race. but the miles wouldn't add up, right? That didn't
Which
quite hit
race
one.
was that?
I did two of them. I did 24-hour solo. One of them was in Vernon, New Jersey, and then one was in Dalton, Massachusetts, I think it was. Yeah. They were before. That was probably back in like 2002, right around that time frame. That series is long gone.
Okay. Yeah. Now, after you got on to these road bikes and TT bikes, I see that you went to the qualifiers for the Tokyo Olympics as well, and you did well there. But you don't have anything on your resume saying that you went to the Tokyo Olympics. So what happened there?
Well, I placed second at trials, but they didn't take first or second actually, because in para it's complicated, but there's there's different categories of athletes and stuff, and so it's not necessarily, especially within cycling, designated like per category, versus in triathlon it is like per category.
Okay, yeah. So and you didn't attempt to do it in the triathlon event?
So for tri, it's less of a trials event, it's more of points races for the year leading up to it.
Okay.
And so I had some like injuries again, like got run over by a truck and stuff, and so kind of was missing those points because it was like the build up to it was a lot longer. So
okay,
yeah.
Well, I know, like with Achilles, breaking down barriers to getting people to the starting line is kind of like your mission. And the Paralympics have been growing every time they've had the Paralympics. What do you think of the Paralympics? Is it getting to a spot where it is getting equally balanced to the Olympics? Is there room to grow? Do you see the sports that you would like to see enter the summer and the winter Olympics?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's definitely growing, right? And it's super cool to see it grow, both because like professionalizing para sports, so adaptive sports on the elite end, I think is super important, super essential. But then all of that kind of trickles down to impact people who are not either yet at the elite end or have no interest in doing elite sports, but do want to do some type of sport, right? So I think it's all really helpful. The visibility is growing, the awareness. Just, you walk into a gym and people these days versus 20, 30 years ago, so much more likely to be aware of adaptive sports and that opportunity and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think the continued bonus coverage of it on the television as well has been a big part of that. That it's not like it's secondary to the Olympics now. It actually has an Olympic standing.
Right. And even, Paralympics obviously is super important. And even like majors like Boston, for example, like having para elite divisions with prize money. Like I raced the Boston half 2 months ago, and there was an elite division that went off 30 seconds after pro women. And it was like having that for the first time ever, so impactful, right? Because it's like you're finally recognizing para elite sports as what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's, you've done obviously the New York City Marathon, and you did your first Boston recently as well. How is it when you go out and do a major event like that for you? I know you have your guide that you tether with. Do you have the bodyguard as well to keep you protected from like the mass of people? Like, do you have extra people around you? How does that work for you in a big event?
So in every marathon except for Boston, we, as in people with disabilities, are able to have two guides, which is super helpful because, right, I have my main guide that I'm tethered with. And then I have a secondary guide who is that sort of running interference. When we're, near an aid station, my main guide and I will kind of go around it, not necessarily get into the mix. And then the second guide will kind of grab cups, bring it to us so that we can avoid, like there's so many times. The majority of accidents that happen within para racing is all around those aid stations because people just like stop without looking and like trip over them and all that. Yeah, it's happened. And so it's interesting because a lot of these races I race, but I also work at. So like, for example, New York City Marathon, right? Like being in charge of New York City for Achilles, it's a lot of work leading up to it. So then it's really cool because I get to view it both as an athlete racing. So I get to talk to all the athletes, be one of them, but then also I get to get a hand in organizing it and running the expo and things like that. So it's just a cool mix.
Yeah, that's great. And have you ever had a guide that loses attention either in training or at a race, and it you run into people? I'm guessing it has to happen at some point.
So she's going to hate me for saying this, but so someone who's crewing for me in Ultraman on our first long training run, this is back last summer, I think we were mile 14 or 15 in, and I kind of come in contact with this low concrete wall. And it's great. Well, and actually we raced I completely forgot about this. We raced a 5K several weeks later. And we came in first, which was good. But then the bad part is that 3 feet across the finish line, we go straight into a cone. So it's kind of a rocky start, but then we placed second at Boston together. We did the Marine Corps 10K, we did the Dallas 50K, this all in the last couple months. So the redemption has been there. But yeah, definitely, I mean, for sure, guides are guides, right? I don't think there is any guide, Brian excluded. Brian's never run me into anything yet. There's time. But all the other main guides that I race with, I've probably run into something at least once with them.
Yeah. Well, and Brian, how about for you? Everyone who races knows that, you're only as good as you are on that race day. And now you having to race with Francesco, it's you guys are only going to be as good as both of you are on that race day. So how much pressure is there on you to, make sure that you show up the best that you can and, perform as best you can to make sure that you're not holding him back on the race as well?
There's not a lot of pressure if you have the conversation. Mm-hmm. I think Francesco and I, when we did Arizona, we talked about it beforehand, and let's face it, I held Francesco back, right? Francesco could have run faster without me attached to him. Now he held me back in the swim most likely. And so it always pays off, but typically when you're guiding with somebody who runs slower than you, right? Someone that because it is very mentally challenging. So you can't just focus on your run, your breathing, your pace, because you're talking,
right?
Calling out curves, calling out cracks, if it's sand or concrete and things like that. So you're typically paired up. And that's what Francesco was leading to before is, at some point in time, I can't race with Francesco. When he was going to do the Olympic trials for Tokyo and the TT, I'm like, don't take me.
Right.
Get another 20 or 30 watts out of somebody else. So it's just having that conversation. And then, the longer the race is, something like this, like Ultraman, I don't feel extra pressure on this one at all. Right. I feel like a guide. I feel like I've been through this, I'm a trusted source, and he's going to have problems and questions, and I'm confident in my abilities and answers that I know we'll get through it together. Yeah. As long as he's doing his swimming. I don't know if he's doing his swimming. He better be doing his swimming. He's skiing. I mean, in the pool.
Yeah. And Francesco, for you, obviously the longest distance you've done is the Ironman Arizona, and now ramping up to get all the training in that you need, and taking vacation to go ski or whatever. Are you finding that you're able to find enough training partners to get the volume that you need?
Yeah. I'm super lucky in New York in that having training partners is never really an issue, especially running. I train most of the new guides we get for running, which is that's a lot of people that I have access to. So that's, honestly, I mean, running, no problems. Cycling, I do most of my biking indoors on a trainer, just more consistent, some longer stuff outdoors, but most of the structured stuff is indoors. Probably the most annoying part, which is what Brian's alluding to, is the swimming, because obviously I don't see that line at the bottom of the pool, so for me it's just kind of just waving your arms and this nothing, right? It's just soul crushing. So I've done a couple the super long swims to get ready for this, and it's just so mentally crushing.
Do you train in an endless pool or in a regular pool?
No, just a regular pool. I don't have access to an endless one, so I just do laps at like a 25-meter pool, and the lifeguards think I'm insane because I'm in there for hours. I'm like, what the hell are you doing, guy? Like, like get out.
Yeah. And when you're doing the swim, I'm guessing this might be one of the harder parts for you guys to sync up on with the swim, because when you're running, you have the ground to give you some idea of where you are, and cycling, you're on the seat, but in the water you're just floating, and I would think it would be easier to separate while you're swimming. So can you tell me a little bit, and maybe Brian, I'll ask you as the guide. Can you tell me a little bit, like, how is it to match stroke rates and be able to make sure you stay that straight line and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's not easy. That's for sure. It's, we're tethered. So we have a tether that goes around our waist and then our thigh. So Francesco's off to my left side. We can separate enough that we're not hitting each other. Typically, occasionally, I'll see Francesco's hand kind of come under my face, or like I'll get a little bump on the side. But the hard part is trying to go straight. That's really the hardest thing. So, if I try to stop every 5 strokes to try to straighten him out, we'd be in there forever. So you just get to the point where you trust the tether for the most part. And, if he starts to feel that pull, he'll start to correct. And he'll start to kind of move to his right a little bit, typically bump into me and kind of reassess where he is.
Right.
And I just, maybe quarter way into that Ironman swim, I was just like, well, there's no way I can tell him anymore. I just got to keep swimming straight. And then hopefully that this works. And then at the buoys, it has to, we got to stop. Let's just stop, tap him on the head. He pops up, right hand turn. Gives him a second to kind of get reoriented, because that's the part I was taking for granted at first. I was just trying to make the turns without letting him know. And then realizing, he pointed out to me in the warm-up swims of like, that's one, how he can kind of tell distance, right? How long we've been, like, I can see the buoys coming, he can't. So it's like, how long have we actually been out here, and how are we moving? And also just reorientating of like, now we're going north or east or something along that lines. So the swimming is definitely tough. The hardest part too is if we're trying to pass somebody in an Ironman situation. There's swimmers everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So to pass somebody, we can't just split them because we have the rope. Or there's times when people try to split us because they're not expecting someone to be tethered.
Right.
So they try to swim in between us because it looks like they're gap, and all of a sudden they're just caught up in a rope. And you're like, oh yeah, no, there's a rope there. Sorry. And they're usually like, what the is going on here? And you're like, don't worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely challenging. And I give Francesco and any athlete who's visually impaired so much credit for, scary enough being in the water, but being strapped to somebody else who you assume knows what the heck they're doing. It's got to be nerve-wracking.
Yeah. Because even with the regular Ultraman race, when you're following your kayak, you're counting on that person to keep you straight. So now we're going to go another level down. It's like, you're going to follow a kayak and he's going to follow you. And it's like, yeah.
Yeah, I actually think it's going to be a little easier that way. Having that kayak there will make it easier for me personally not to have to sight so far.
Right.
Using that kayak and understanding, like, you just got to trust them, that they're taking us in the quickest route. So I think that might actually be a little bit more helpful. I'm hoping, at least.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's the swim. Let me ask a couple of questions about your biking. On your tandem bike, what are the bike positions? Like, I assume you probably have normal aero bars on the front, but what do you have on the back? Are you able to change positions on the back?
So I don't have aero bars in the back. I have very low drops. So I'm also 6'5", 6 inch, so I'm 6'6", and a lot of my pilots are not 6'6", and so like for me, it's always a quite, like if I'm doing a sprint race, because all the para stuff for nationals and all that stuff, those are all sprint distance, right? So 20K bikes for that, like I can get down real low for 20K, like it's fine. For 112 miles or for Ultraman, like there's no way I'm fully tucked, because it's all the weight on the hands, right? Like my hands are basically numb after 20, 30 minutes. So it's definitely going to be a question of aerodynamics versus comfort and all that stuff.
Yeah. So you don't have a lot of positions that you can switch into to stay comfortable on that full day 2 bike ride.
No, because there's also they regulate the total length of a bike. So when you're when you're getting a bike, you can't just get it so long that you can fit aero bars in the back. Like there's a ton of limitations like that as well. So, if I was a foot and a half shorter, then maybe we can figure out a TT position in the back as well, but it's just not possible.
Mm-hmm. And how do you travel with it? How does the bike break down? Does the frame come apart?
Yeah, so it breaks apart into 3 pieces, and so it fits into 2 normal sized luggage, checkable suitcases. So super convenient.
That's great. Yeah. And now, would either of you know, as a tandem rider, is your weight to power ratio does it give you an advantage when you're out there riding, or is it a disadvantage scientifically?
What do you think?
Yeah. On a flat road, it's an advantage because weight doesn't impact your speed nearly as much as aerodynamics does on a flat road. So on a flat road, we can get going. On an up a hill, we're a little bit at a disadvantage there. But still, it's watts per kilogram. Now, our watts don't necessarily just combine, right? If I'm doing 200 watts and he's doing 200 watts, we don't get 400 watts out of that. I don't know what the mathematical equation would be. We've talked about testing it, trying to figure it out using a power hub, right? Like a power tap hub wheel, and then also using our power meters because we'll both use power pedals on the bike, and then we can take those and figure out what is actually resulting to that back wheel. We haven't done it yet, but we've definitely talked about and thought about doing that. It's hard to find a power tap hub wheel that's made for a tandem, so that's one part of it. But we definitely have, I think, I don't want to say an advantage, but an advantage probably on the flat road. We get moving pretty quick. Yeah.
I guess there's not enough people riding tandem to have a lot of scientific information out there about it at this point, right?
Yeah, I'm sure there is, especially on the track. Most likely, that's probably where it would originate. Track tandem cycling is much more popular than road tandem cycling, racing wise.
Yeah, and are you guys able to get fully aero? Like you're saying, you're bigger and you're on the back, or do you produce a drag with the longer bike and you being bigger on the back, or how does that work?
For longer races, yes, because I'm not tucked as low. If it's like a sprint distance race, I can basically plank for 25 minutes or however long it takes to do 20K, and it's fine. But my hands start going numb after basically 30 minutes if I'm in the full low position.
Right.
So if we're on the bike for hours, there's no way.
Yeah. And depends on who the pilot is as well. I'm only 5'10", so I don't create a very big fairing for him. Right. So for him to get low, he's got to get lower than me for that wind to go across. So, for a TT or, a sprint triathlon, he's better off with a guy who would be in that 6'1", 6'2" frame size to create a better fairing for the aerodynamics.
Yeah. And when you did Ironman Arizona, Brian, did you notice anybody trying to draft off of you guys? Do you create a bigger draft zone?
The bike's too long. I can't see past Francesco.
And how is it learning to ride a long bike like that? The handling, how long did it take you to get into that?
Day one. Biking's biking. The hard part's 180s. And for some reason, in all para racing, they love to put in 180-degree turns for the tandem bikes. It's like turning a semi truck. You have to have the space, and we're gonna go off the edge of the road most likely. And it's whether I tell Francesco or not that we're actually off the road or not. I'm just just pedal hard. He's like, "Are we okay?" I'm like, "We're just pedal."
Yeah.
But how much takes a little while.
And how much are you communicating about gear changing, or this hill is coming, or I need you to lean left, and how much of that is happening while you're riding?
Should be a lot. Francesco tells me to talk more. The hard part I find is, as a cyclist, we think everything. We see the hill coming up, we see the corner, we know to put our right foot up. It's thinking out loud. That's really the hardest thing, is thinking out loud and screaming it out so he can hear, over the wind.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing, is you just got to constantly talk, even to take a drink. Like, he has to say to me, like, I want to take a drink. We have to stop pedaling because our feet are in step.
Right.
So for him to reach down, we got to stop. It shifts the weight of the bike as well and all that stuff. But that works itself out pretty quickly.
Now, Francesco, you were saying with your skiing that you actually have a speaker in your helmet. Is that allowed in the racing?
I don't really know, honestly. There's a lot of rules in para racing that just come over from UCI or other, like the able body side, just because, like, for no real big reason. So, like, if there's a rule that says like you can't have a radio in your ear, it could just be transferred over to para racing for no reason,
Yeah.
I mean, if we're going into the wind, there's very little that I can hear, even if he's yelling at the top of his lungs. And so, but because, like, I've raced with Brian so much, like, I basically know what he's going to say, right? It's either turns, in which case I just have to hear right or left. Everything else I can kind of figure out based on, like, how he feels on the bike, what the frame is doing. Like, you can kind of, once you get to know someone, you kind of tell what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, but no, I haven't tried radios or anything like that.
Mm. And I guess when you're on the bike, all of your communication is going to be technical. Then you're not really just having a chat because you need to be focused on keeping the bike going, or do you get a chance to just have a chat as well?
There's definitely a little bit of chat, especially like the longer the ride is, right? It's like, oh man, my butt really hurts. Like, there's definitely some communication going on. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I know most 5:15 athletes will get to a point on day 3, usually, where they don't want anybody to talk to them at all. They'll be sending the pacer away back to the crew vehicle, and they don't want people to talk to them. Have you guys talked about that? Are you going to be able to do that? How are you going to approach when we get into these moods on a 3-day trip here?
I'd love to see Brian's reaction. Brian, I got this, man. I got the last 10 miles. I don't think that would go so well.
Yeah, it's, listen, we've traveled a lot together, for Ironman Arizona, and for the USA cycling stuff, we're usually in a hotel room with each other for like 4 or 5 days traveling. And yeah, I think we're okay with quiet time. I don't think either of us are upset about that. And, the good thing is too, is we do have a crew. So we're going to be lucky enough, and, Ultraman Florida is allowing us to have an actual pacer with us. So as I'm guiding him on that run day, I'm not considered a pacer. I'm considered a guide. Right. So we will have a third person there to kind of help alert us for traffic and stuff like that. That will also, I think, help break the ice a little bit of us two not having to talk to each other for 12 hours a day, 3 days in a row.
Yeah. And you're going to be with him for the entire race. So are you going to be an official finisher as well?
No, I don't believe so. So the rule, because this was all new. So Jen and Ultraman family, we were kind of sending emails back and forth originally when we had this idea last year that we were going to try this. And the Ultraman says that we are allowed to have multiple guides throughout this race. So we can trade off whenever we want to. Mm-hmm. Francesco and I have decided that we want to do this start to finish together, because I felt, as a past participant, I feel like that's part of the race.
Yeah.
That, like, I think the guide and the athlete should go through this whole thing together. But from Ultraman's perspective, and I agree with this 100%, is that's a hard barrier for other athletes to then come in. To not only does the athlete want to do this race, but to be able to find a guide to train with who's willing to do this race with them. Mm-hmm. So having multiple guides allows greater access for future athletes to come into, which I agree with 100% when they put it that way. Yeah. But we think for, how this race was created and what this race is, we're going to attempt to finish this together. But, if I feel I'm holding him back, or I feel like I'm going to be a liability, I will step off that course in a second for Francesco to do this. This is his race. I'm there selfishly to be a part of it.
Mm. And in Ironman, how do they treat that? Did you get an official finisher in the Ironman race?
I did. I believe I am now listed. It was not in the past, but now you are. The athlete is listed. Typically in triathlon, the guide is listed as a piece of equipment. Essentially, it's just the guide. In cycling and in running, in cycling, it's not that case. In cycling, you're considered a team, a pilot, stoker. So Ironman was always that way. But this year, when we signed in, I had a separate number, and I have his finishing time, obviously, because we were together the whole time.
Right.
Yeah. That'd be weird if we didn't.
Yeah. So it's your
finishing time is different from my finishing time.
I thought about it. I thought about leaving you for a part.
Yeah.
Now, Brian, you've had obviously a lot more experience in the ultra field. You've raced 7 Ironmans, you've done Ultraman Florida, you've crewed there, you've done a number of ultra runs. Firstly, which runs have you competed at? And secondly, what kind of extra knowledge do you feel that you'll bring based on those experiences? Because as I'm sure you know, both of you as coaches, like most people kind of learn more from their failures and digging at a dark places and those big experiences. So hopefully you can bring some of that when it comes up in Ultraman, as it inevitably will for most athletes. But tell us a little bit about your background and what you think you can bring as the coach and not the guide for Francesco's race.
Yeah, so definitely a good experience in ultra events in a variety. Like I did 24-hour mountain biking race, Leadville 100 mountain bike, obviously Ultraman Florida. I did long gravel last year, the black course at Steamboat, which is like 142 miles. And then the Vermont 100 run. And the Vermont 100 run was probably my biggest learning experience. And like you said, you learn through what? Your failures. And that's really, I didn't finish. And it was hard to not finish, right? Like that's always a disappointment. And my kids were there. This is going back maybe 6 years ago or 5 years ago. I can't remember at this point, 5 years ago. My kids were like, don't worry, you'll do it next year. You'll finish. And I looked at them, I said, no, I won't. And they're like, what do you mean? Like you didn't make it. You always go back and do it. And I said, if I can't train properly for this, then I won't do it. And today beat me. This course beat me. This race beat me. I was not prepared the way I should have been. Mentally I was, and emotionally I was, but physically I wasn't there for that amount of just elevation gain training in New York. I just couldn't get it. And I learned so much from that point. And what we're trying to find all the time is what our limits are. And that day I found my limit. Like that was it. And I think that's the lesson we're all looking for. And that is the knowledge that I have used going forward to everything. And that I'm sure we're going to need in this 3 days. At some point in time, everybody wants to stop. At some point in time, you have that conversation of like, why keep going? Should I keep going? Can I keep going? And it's just, making sure you're surrounded with the people and your crew that are there to give you the honest answer and say, no, yeah, you're done. Like, you're not going to make the time cutoff, right? So you can either go get lost in the woods for a little bit or, be safe and cut it off here. And I'm sure there are going to be points, for, like you said, every Ultraman athlete, especially on day 3 at some point in time is like, what am I doing? And, am I going to make this time cutoff? Yeah. And I think that's what I'll bring, and most of it's just empathy and understanding how he's going to feel, understanding how I'm going to feel that day, and realizing, this is where guiding is actually easier. And I thought Ironman Arizona was one of the easiest experiences of my life because it wasn't for me, right? It wasn't, can I stop or will I stop? That wasn't a choice. It's, I don't have a choice to stop, right? This is, if I stop, Francesco stops, and I can't make that choice for him. He's got to make it. So I'm thinking it's going to be easier for me on that 3rd day than it is going to be for him.
Nervous laughter.
Nervous laughter, exactly.
And Francesco, how are you feeling for your readiness? what's the longest run you've ever done? Or what are you thinking about this day 3? Do you feel prepared for what's ahead in this 5:15 race for you?
Yeah, I see. Well, obviously, first of all, like disclaimer, right? Having like no idea about what I'm getting myself into. I did a 50K, and that's the longest run I've done. But like, I feel like a decent runner. Like, whatever. Like, I'm sure it'll suck, but I'm honestly, if I had to choose like one thing that I'm most worried about, it's the swim, because like I never grew up swimming. I started swimming 5 years ago, and trying to learn a very like visual stroke like freestyle when you have I still have no visual conception of what it's supposed to look like. And so like trying to do that, and all the limitations around swimming, and dealing with people in a lane when you can't see that. I don't know. It's just a long time, right? And where like a lot of different factors and elements can come into play. That's honestly what I'm thinking about. Like biking, yes, it's long, but like Brian and I have done biking. Sure, it'll suck, but it's biking, and running is running. Like honestly, like, if I can get through that swim, I think the weight will come off. And again, I'm sure it'll suck the rest of it, but it's that's the way I'm at. There's like so many unknowns. I think that's the thing, right? It's the unknowns of a 10K swim.
Yeah.
And this is what's so great about it, right? This is that, like, watching Francesco talk about this is what's so exciting about these ultra distance events, right? Is like, you don't know what's to come. It's so scary that you are not guaranteed a finish line. In most of the races we keep doing, we're guaranteed the finish line. We've been there, or it's so attainable. We know our friends have done it, right? 10 of your friends have all finished that Ironman. So you're like, yeah, I can do this. I know Charlie did it. No problem. I'm going to do it. Right. This is one of these events of like, you probably don't know anybody who's actually done it. So you walk into this like, man, can I do this? And you're going to have that question multiple times on every single day. That's why I wanted Francesco to do this race. Yeah. Like, he's young, but he's ready for this. Like, he's got that emotional awareness and drive. Like this race, like, oh man, I'm so excited. Like, this is going to be and like I said, selfishly, I get to be there. Like, I get to be there for those moments, the multiple moments through there. Like, I can't wait to pop up on that kayak at some point in time and look over at him, and he's just like, where are we? Like, how much longer to go? Like, I'm freezing. We've been out here forever, like, oh, I can't wait. It'd be amazing.
Well,
Francesco, that's great.
In 2016, Brian finished the race in 30 hours, 52 minutes, and 19 seconds. Are you going to beat that?
30 hours, 52 minutes, and 15 seconds.
Well, the good news is, if he beats it, I still beat it too.
So you just need to like tell me when we're like 10 yards from the finish line. I'll just like unclip the tether, just book it, and hope that I make it across the finish. Like, I might go way off. We'll see.
Sure. I'm sure I'll tell you 10 yards before, not after.
Yeah. This blind man come like tearing through the finish line, like, like on his own.
Well, I'm pretty proud right now to say that my audience is international, and the 5:15 podcast has had downloads from 68 countries around the world and over 1,375 cities. So if someone out there is listening right now and wants to find out how they can see if there's a chapter of Achilles in their city, what is that website that they go to? How do they go about doing it? And give us a little information about that, because you are also an international organization, correct?
Yes. So it's Achilles International. So Achilles like the heel, ACHILLES, then international.org. And when you log on there, there's a join button, and it'll tell you it's a basic application. It'll tell you where all the chapters are around the world. There are some remote places. I mean, obviously New York City, LA, but Mongolia and Tokyo are two of our biggest chapters. South Africa, there are chapters everywhere. So when in doubt, just check it out.
Yeah. And obviously, the people that listen to this podcast also do a lot of traveling for races. So maybe they can check it out on one of their travels and go get a workout in as well.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And there's, again, people of all different levels. There are people who literally only walk, and there are people who do Ironman and triathlon. So, and hopefully in a couple of weeks, you can say that there's people who do Ultraman. So, yeah, huge range. And it'd be amazing if anyone came and checked it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you guys for spending time with me today. And Francesco, congratulations to you for being the first blind man to attempt Ultraman Florida. And I look forward to hearing Steve King call you across the finish line at that end of that double marathon. Good luck to both of you. I'm sure it'll be a fantastic experience. And I'd love to catch up and hear how it went for you. And if there's anything that Ultraman needs to be doing in the future to make it more accessible for more athletes.
Awesome. Thanks.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can't wait.
All right. Good luck. Wow, that hour felt more like 25 minutes. I hope I asked all the questions that you would have. If you ever want to give me feedback about the show, please contact me at the 515 socials and make sure to follow them as well. Finally, just a reminder to download the special in-between episode that will preview Ultraman Florida and also have another athlete in profile with Amy Jo Jenkins. Here's just a few seconds of that upcoming conversation. And do you have any fears leading up to this race? What's your biggest fear about trying to do this race?
Oh, that's a good question. My fears are probably pretty silly. Had you had asked me prior to this 2016 experience, like my biggest fear would have been like, oh, what if I fail? I've done that like a million times now. You live to see another day. It's not the end of the world.
Hey, if you liked what you heard today, please tell a friend and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'd appreciate it if you'd rate and review the show while you're there. Drop the names of the people you think we should interview and we'll get in touch with them and make that happen. Thank you for listening to 515, the Ultra Podcast, a production of 55 Enterprises. Now really, go subscribe now before you forget.